ahead of a schedule either way.
Yeah, how's the group feeling? Shall we forge on? Yeah, let's do that. We just got back from lunch. So, okay, so now we will move into our financing work group. And you know, we are near the end of our working group report outs. I'd like to now turn the presentation over to David Dvorny, who will report out for working group number 5. And we'll go from there. So thank you. And I'll actually step off now, and then Tom Cordero will take over now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Delphin. I really appreciate it. So I'm here to talk a little bit about working group number 5 as the last working group to report out. And so next slide, please. First of all, I'd like to thank the other members of our working group. You know, we've had some really good conversations since our last meeting. And we're really trying to move forward with trying to figure out what our work plan is and implementing some new activities in addition to the existing activities that you've heard about on our last calls. But I do want to recognize members. We're lucky to have strong membership across both federal and non-federal membership. And I also just want to specifically recognize Mike Watterson, who's been instrumental in kind of keeping the work group activities running, but also the contributions really of everybody in the discussion since our last meeting. And I'll you all can read the names on this slide, so I'm not going to read all the names, but I do want to just thank all the working group members and for their participation. They're all very busy and they've made a lot of time for this working group. Next slide, please. So we have finally all of our recommendations in place for the working group, which is great. And here's the complete list after kind of the approval of the last issues that we worked out under the last meeting. So the first recommendation is around implementing payment models in federal health benefit programs that address population disparities and social determinants of health. The second is to adequately fund the full range of services needed by people with serious mental illness and serious emotional disturbances. The third is really focused on parity of service, parity in coverage and services for people with serious mental illness and serious emotional disturbances. The fourth is around the elimination of discriminatory practices and around financing and discriminatory policies that discriminate against people with mental and substance use disorders. The fifth is to pay for psychiatric and other behavioral services at rates that are equivalent to other health services. The sixth is around reimbursement for outreach and engagement services that can be so important for people with serious mental illness and serious emotional disturbances. Seventh is around funding adequate home and community-based services for people with SMI and SED. The eighth is really focused specifically on improving the spread of the certified community behavioral health clinic model nationwide. And then the ninth is one that we've added in the last couple of years. It's a new recommendation around developing sustainable financing for 988 and crisis systems nationwide. So those are our recommendations, and we do have a few priorities within those, and we'll address those on the next slide. So these are some of the areas where we have, I think, the most movement, and kind of we have identified as, you know, our priorities in the near term. We have at the federal level been working across several departments: Department of Labor, SSIO here in HHS, Treasury, as well as SAMHSA and other folks to advance parity and to implement new regulations around parity. And so there's just been a lot of activities, and we've reported that around that in fair amount of detail in some of our more recent meetings. We're not going to do that today, but that work is ongoing. There's been a lot of work related to the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic program. So you've heard about a little bit of that today, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a second. We are continuing to work with the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine around a study that is looking at barriers that limits provider participation in Medicare and Medicaid. And I think that's just such a critical issue for improving access. Is really addressing those issues, which, you know, affect, you know, the workforce, and the workforce is really, I think, at this point, a rate limiting step at the level which we're able to provide services. But the good news is that committee has been meeting. They've made a lot of progress. I understand on a draft. The way that process works is it's held fairly close to the vest. It's an independent process, but my understanding is we're going to be seeing something coming out of that in the relatively near future. And then finally, we've had a lot of conversations in our group over the last couple of months around what our priorities are going to be. And we've been thinking similar to the third working group that one of the important areas that we'd like to focus on is supported employment. One of the things that we've seen in looking at some of our state data reporting on service uptake for people participating in the state system is that, a very small percentage of people receive supported employment services who are participating in public mental health systems. And we do think that those services, have great practice, great promise, not only in their ability to support improved employment outcomes, but also to support social inclusion, and then to have, broader positive impacts on health and functioning. And so we think that they're really important, and we want to look at what is the financing aspects of that? Where are there opportunities? And then also, how is it possible that we could maybe reframe or understand the research a little bit better so that we're not just focused on the employment outcomes, but looking at the benefits in terms of health and functioning, because really we think that these can be seen as, direct determinants of health outcomes, these programs and interventions. And if they're seen that way, it may be that they can be more commonly covered in health systems as opposed to seen as a social service. So those are some of the areas we're doing a lot of work. I did want to talk a little bit about the certified community behavioral health clinics in a little bit more detail. So we have some exciting, I think, news in addition to the bullets that are on this screen here. So CCBHCs are continuing to expand. We just this last week received our applications for the next round of states to join the CCBHC Medicaid demonstration. And so we have a set of applications that came in. And we'll be selecting 10 of those to join the CCBHC demonstration. And we'll be making those announcements in June with states joining as early as July 1st of this year. And we talked about this a little bit in past calls, but this is the first of the additions that are resulting from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And we'll be adding 10 more states every 2 years to the CCBHC demonstration until we run out of interested states. And this is really an exciting opportunity for states because not only does it give them the ability to build out comprehensive services in these clinics, but for the state, for the 4-year demonstration period that this makes them eligible for, they get an enhanced match through Medicaid. So they actually get a higher level of reimbursement from the federal government for setting up these programs. And we think that's really great incentive for states as they build out these programs. Second thing that we've been able to do this year is to launch a state technical assistance center for the CCBHC program. And this technical assistance center is not only focused on the existing states that are in the CCBHC Medicaid demonstration or the other states that have built out CCBHC programs, but is also is supposed to support the planning grants, those states that are actively working to build CCBHC programs, as well as those states that may be trying to consider the model. So states that are trying to figure out how this might fit into their service system. So, we want to get this out far and wide. We think the states are essential to the development of the CCBHC network around the country. And we now have really concrete resources to support states in their work around the CCBHC model. Finally, in this new world where we can do things like travel and see each other in person, we have been kicking off our first regional meetings. These are really the first grantee meetings we've ever had with CCBHCs. We recently completed a meeting for East Coast grantees here in Washington, D.C. And then we just had a team of folks who went, including myself, we went last week out to Seattle and met with grantees from the Western United States. We have 3 more regional meetings that we'll be having over the course of the spring in New Orleans, Chicago, and sorry, I'm forgetting the last one, but and then we're going to be having a state meeting so bringing together state leaders from across the country instead of focusing on the clinics. The clinics are the focus of those regional meetings. Boston, thank you. A teammate just messaged me. So the other one's in Boston for the Northeast, but the state meeting is going to be here in DC and going to bring together officials from across the country to talk about their programs wherever they are in that course of development. And the exciting news that's not on this slide is that we were really happy to see in the first of the appropriations bills that just passed, so the first minibus bill that just passed, included a permanent option within Medicaid to support the CCBHC model. And so until now, the CCBHC model has only existed in the Medicaid system as a temporary demonstration. And now there's a clear path in statute for states to either develop a program from scratch or to continue the programs they've developed through the demonstration program in Medicaid. And that's a very recent development. So I think there'll be more news about that. We haven't put out a lot of guidance or anything else around how that would be implemented, but it's in law now. And that's a huge step forward for the permanence of the CCBHC model. And so just want to point that as a fairly major accomplishment on the path to building out CCBHCs, in a much broader set of states. So that's I think we had tryouts, triumphs in every other areas, but for this report out, we decided to focus a little bit more on the CCBHCs, and I think with that, we'll go on to our questions for the group. So we have 3 different questions, and we tried to touch on different areas. The first is, as I had mentioned, we wanted to build out, we're thinking about supported employment as a key area of focus, trying to understand, barriers related to financing, and opportunities in financing for supported employment, as well as, what we can be doing to better understand supported employment in a way that might support uptake of supported employment services. And so we wanted to ask this group, and we're aware of some of it, and some of it was already talked about. Is there any work or developments that we should consider as we explore a project related to the financing of supported employment services? I think I'll go through all the questions and then we can come back to them one at a time. So the second question is, we've just, been, it's been very sad to see the increases, and I think no one is surprised given what's happening with the housing supply and other trends in our country. But we've been very sad to see the recent increases in the numbers of people experiencing homelessness. And so this isn't an area we focused on intentionally yet so far in front of this group. And so we wanted to raise a discussion with this group to see if there's any thing that this group would suggest we focus on at the intersection of financing and homelessness, especially kind of in the lens of considering serious mental illness. And then the third question is, one thing that we think is really important, this is for states, especially as they plan out their service systems, but also at the local level, is understanding community need is really should drive systems. And we wanted to talk a little bit or see if you had any input about, what you think states and communities could use as in terms of tools, understanding the needs within their systems to drive their financing systems. And so one example of this is oftentimes people turn to assertive community treatment as the answer to, what community-based services for serious mental illness should be. And they say we should just fund ACT, but ACT is actually designed for a subsection of people with serious mental illness, not for everybody with serious mental illness. And so the question is, how do you determine what the correct level of need is for assertive community treatment, and what the size of the population that needs that, and what services you develop if you're not going to be providing ACT outside of that intensive ACT level of care. And so we wanted to ask a question around that, what folks think we should be thinking about in terms of helping states and communities assess level of need to inform their service system design. So I'll circle back to the first question and see if folks have any input around the supported employment question. Dr. Everett?
Yeah, so David, would a way to frame what you're asking be something like, based on the experience in of our ISMIC members, what could we do that would advance this? Would it be something like a subject matter panel? Would it be a paper? Would it be what you're asking sort of for what mechanism or what? Yeah.
So we're thinking about trying to, if we can develop some kind of a resource around supported employment, and we aware of the great work happening with Department of Labor and Aspire. We've done some work internally. We've got a couple. We're working. We just finished a policy academy, or we're developing a report out of a policy academy on supported employment in youth, and we're also working on a supported employment policy academy focusing on CCBHCs. We wanted to kind of get a landscape. Are there other projects or other research or other things that we should be thinking about in the realm of supported employment that might be helpful to inform a potential focus on financing and supported employment?
I'm just going to jump in again. Part of what I was thinking is I know we have a number of judges, and we also know that employment after incarceration or employment for folks that are involved in criminal justice has a lot to do with keeping people in community and out of jail once they could secure employment. So I wondered if our judges might have some experiences with that.
I mean, we work closely with like clubhouses and fresh start programs, and we find them incredibly important and has to be part of the continuum when people are leaving all of our systems, not just coming out of jail, but to help avoid people from ever coming in. So it should be offered at all different intercepts.
For the misdemeanor court that I preside over, we do have a work arrangement with our workforce development here in our county, where we work with our participants for gainful employment while they're with us, which is a year's requirement at minimum, and when they leave us. So we do work with them in terms of that.
And if you don't mind me asking, how does that get paid for?
Who pays for the work that we do?
The training that it already kind of.
Okay, sure. Workforce development is something that's funded by our county, but our county has also invested in 3 full-time positions for our misdemeanor mental health court.
And in
So
our
they have folks, they have folks that sort of help with that are on salary, so to speak, to the county.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay.
And in the new facility that we're opening this year, we're going to have a culinary supportive employment program, computer program, and ability to get GED and college degrees. But Workforce Florida, which is kind of a state and county funded program that draws on all kinds of resources, including federal, they're going to finance it for us. And Miami-Dade College is going to provide the services for the individuals.
That's great. Yeah, I think we're interested in, lots of models where we are focused, I think, a fair amount on the individual placement support model. And that's the kind of, but we understand that may not work for everybody. And we also want to open the door to, other models of support. And so that's great to hear about. And so that's great. And, another thing to think about is criminal justice outcomes, and if that could be a focus of some of the work. As I don't know if I've seen that explored in the kind of same detail as other types of outcomes.
David, there are a couple of comments in the chat. Did you notice those?
Oh, thank you so much.
No, that's right. One from Sean. He's talking about resurrecting and reevaluating good and modern services array. And then there's one from Margaret as well.
Yeah, I think the good and modern framework, is great. I think it was really groundbreaking at the time. It was one of the first times someone had kind of sketched out what should be included, I think, as an expectation of systems. And, it is now, I think, more than a decade old.
I haven't heard it talked about in a while.
So I think that's a great idea. And it certainly would fit into the third question, trying to understand what kind of the range of support should be included for somebody, not only what support should be there, but how you get people to the right supports for their needs.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think that's how Sean intended it as an input to number 3. And then
Great.
Margaret had a comment too regarding question 3. Perhaps a system akin to the ASAM levels of care focused on SMI. Is this for this one, for this group?
Yeah.
This may already exist, but it may not be used as an ASAM system for substance use.
Right. So I think what Becky's saying is that ASAM has let out the levels of care for substance use, for addictions, and and they've developed the whole mapping of across the continuum from low intensity up to high intensity. And is there a similar map out for mental illness? And I think Belina had mentioned LOCUS, or the level of care utilization system, is a slightly analogous on the mental health side, but that it's interesting, when we first started ISMIC in 2017, we did start an effort to try and think about what this continuum might look like for serious mental illness. And I think that kind of, had some initial work around to it, but it didn't end up, coming to fruition. So maybe that could be an area we think about, thinking about the broader continuum of services, and kind of, Sean, I really appreciate the comment, and Peggy, but Sean, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say to kind of unpack your comment a little bit more.
I realized my camera was way over there before, but so I moved it. Sorry. Yeah, exactly as Tom mentioned, it's really thinking about, we want to, what should be available in a community should start with what is what we could say about an adequate service array generally that serves lots of different needs and people's perspectives. And I think that's going to open up, if we can do that and reopen or look at the good modern thing, it might help us be able to think about, how to recommend this. As we know, this in any community, there's a ton of different support needs and people, and some people like this kind of service or that kind of service, and there's, of course, cultural needs as well, and so differentiation as well. So I think it would be a great exercise to think about that, and then start to, how to roll it out or whatever, how to promote it is another question, but I think that can be done. I don't know how far that good modern actually got in terms of practice the first round 10 years ago. I think it was kind of like mostly an internal thing. I know you kind of had a website but this, the question is, we want to seriously look at that as a way to start to give people a sense of, like, you need a lot of options. And I would also recommend that we, which is included in the community clinic model, is having really emphasizing the person-centered focus of all this. Like, there's a great array of stuff. How do you do that? Use a person-centered model to help make sure we understand what people's preferences are, and go there, because that's where the motivation starts, with the person's own perspectives and preferences.
Absolutely.
Right. So, thanks.
That's great. That's something we can take back to the group. I think, we've been focusing on employment, but that may be another thing to consider, as a potential focus. Andrea, I see you have your hand up. I think you may be on mute. Sorry. Oh, I think you may still be on mute. I don't know. Is it letting you on? Oh, there you go.
There we go. Thank you for your patience. So I know some of you are on the 988 BHCC work group, and it seems like there's been a lot of discussion and work done already within SAMHSA and 988 around the crisis continuum of care. So it's sort of already happening at the moment, and that could be either something to build on, something to start with, but it's certainly a great body of work already.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different ways you could, there's ASAM, there's Locus, there's kind of differing issues for, children and youth and young people than for adults. So I think there's a number of different, kind of ways you can think about the service array or the continuum, or, however you want to describe it. But I do think it's, it would be helpful to have it all in one place, and, it'd be helpful for system planners. And then, I think the great thing about the ASAM criteria is, it really has provided a lot of clarity for the field. And so, I think that's a great suggestion.
David, I'm thinking about combining the last two, like your presentation and the working group, the prior working group's presentation. And I was thinking a little bit about, is there a possibility of something like a working group or a learning collaborative around the waivers, either the SDOH waivers that states can apply for, or the ones regarding the transition between detention and the community. But whether or not there's some way to learn from those communities and think about best practices, and really combine the work of two of these working groups, between this one or the access and engagement working group as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then, we're now at the point where there's, a set of, I think, 10 or 11 states that have also done the SMI SED waivers too. And so there has been a fair amount of work. I think we're just starting to see maybe some outcomes from those programs. We're still kind of, when we talk to the folks who work on the 1115s, we do ask them about that program. So I do think there's, there's a lot of, different things happening in states right now, and a lot of exciting work across, the new guidance that's come out, as well as some of the stuff that's kind of been percolating over the last couple of years. So certainly, I think that could be interesting to look at. I do think that would be a piece of, probably, almost any of these focuses, but understanding, the work that's happening in the states with the flexibilities that have been, and the options that have been kind of presented to them through Medicaid.
And along those lines too, the IBH model too.
Sure.
There's, a way to convene that group and learn from and strengthen them and us learn as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, appreciate the input. I don't know if people want to have anything else they want to raise related to, either homelessness, employment, or this broader idea, but I do love the idea of thinking about the, that good modern framework of kind of mapping out what the array is. And I also think that a key part of that is also then telling people, how you determine where you get what's the appropriate way to design a system around the community need, not just telling them what services to provide, but or what the complete array of services looks like, but then how you decide who may fit or who may benefit from different parts of that array. So it's a great suggestion.
I don't know if Olina wants to talk at all about her comment. She dropped in responding to Peggy, suggesting that locus might be similar to what Peggy was referring to in her previous comment.
No, nothing more. I think David mentioned in passing, as we were talking about different options and opportunities for levels of care and utilization and how that might relate to financing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for suggesting it. I think that's such value in this kind of brainstorming for that reason.
All right. Well, I don't know if folks have anything else on this. Otherwise, I won't be offended. I know they jumped back and then they came back to the slide. So, but if we want to
Last call for any comments here as part of this discussion. Thanks, David, for a great presentation from the financing group and a great discussion from the ISMIC around it. Let's, if there's no additional discussion from the group, we can vote to approve the report of the working group. So we'll entertain a motion to accept the working group report. May I have a motion?
I move to accept the working group report. This is Jennifer Higgins.
Jennifer moves, and is there a second?
Second.
This is Rhonda Basha, second.
Okay, we had a couple of seconds there. I'm hoping the group caught them. Rhonda and Ron, I think, both jumped in to second it. Would all the ISMIC members unmute themselves? All in favor say A, and all opposed say nay.
Hey.
Hey. Hey.
A's have it, and the report is. So at this point, I think we're going to go back to the break. I know we just came back on after lunch, but we do have time scheduled in here for a break. So let's take the break now. We'll do a 15-minute break. So let's come back at around 2:50 for the next segment, which is public comment. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed your break. Got to use the facilities and refill your drinks, get a little snack maybe. I think we're going to move the slide to the next part of our presentation, which of course is public comment. That's the portion of the agenda where we hear from folks that are non-ISMIC members. And for that, I will turn it back over to our designated federal official, Pamela Foot. Pam?
Thank you so much, Tom. So now's a portion of the meeting, as Tom mentioned, where the public is able to make comments. Those who have submitted public comments to me, I will call on you in the order that they were received. If you are joined virtually, once I call your name, please raise your hand. If you are joined by phone, please press *9 when I call your name. Sorry about that. Moving on to the first individual, Daryl Herman. Hi, Daryl. If you are joined, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can. Please go ahead.
Virtually every psychiatric hospital in the United States today claims to be recovery oriented. For psychiatric illnesses, this claim is a complete illusion. They claim to be recovery oriented based on the SAMHSA working definition for recovery. This document is woefully deficient for psychotic illnesses. I believe we successfully with schizophrenia for 39 years. After diagnosis, I earned a BS in computer science. I worked very successfully as a computer programmer for 18 years. The stress of working and coping with my diagnosis became more than I could handle. I went on disability. I became a volunteer recovery educator in psychiatric hospitals in Columbus, Ohio for over 15 years. In the 10 years prior to COVID, I spoke to more than 30,000 people in those hospital groups. My lived experience gives me a unique perspective on these facilities and their patients with psychosis. The first serious flaw in the SAMHSA document is it places only 2 requirements of facilities. These are cultural competence and trauma-informed care. I've never seen mention of psychosis with cultural competence. Psychosis aftermath is highly traumatic for most. There's no mention of psychosis with trauma-informed care. Staff members often have a completely erroneous understanding of what psychosis is and are completely ignorant of what the experience is like. The second serious flaw in the SAMHSA document concerns the importance of making informed, healthy choices that support physical and emotional well-being. The SAMHSA document charges no one with educated patients so they are informed enough to make healthy choices. The most obvious place to teach this information is in psychiatric hospitals. When read, the patient is not capable of learning this material, but they are prior to discharge. The basics could be taught in a half-day session without significant cost increases that should significantly reduce relapse and readmission and produce better recoveries. Each patient with psychosis should receive his or her current diagnosis and basic education on symptoms of psychosis. They should be told the common causes of and warning signs of relapse, so they can ask for help in a timely manner. They should know the common side effects of medications for psychotic illnesses and strategies for coping with psychotic illness to live a relatively normal life. It's critical to inform these patients that you can live a relatively normal life with a psychotic illness. Psychiatric hospitals do not teach these things, and most staff are completely unaware of them. During the hospital stay, most patients receive no meaningful therapy other than medication. This situation is like diagnosing someone with type 1 diabetes, telling them to take insulin with no other medical education whatsoever. The idea that these facilities are recovery-oriented is a complete illusion. These facilities are doing essentially nothing to promote the recovery of their patients with psychotic illnesses. Although many people achieve a good recovery, this is in spite of the mental health system, not because of it. The SAMHSA guidelines are aspirational in nature and provide no practical framework to aid patients with psychosis to achieve recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herman, for your public comment. Moving on to Marjorie Wakefield.
Not seeing a response.
Thank you, Selby. Moving on to Ann Corcoran.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. As Executive Director of the National Shadow and Silence Coalition, a grassroots organization that advocates for a more just and compassionate world for those living with severe mental illness, it has never been more evident that we are failing terribly for those living with no-fault brain disorders, families, and the public, despite increased spending on mental health in our country. The stories from families that reach out to me are truly horrifying. Tristan Murphy was a 37-year-old man who lived with schizophrenia and was arrested for driving his truck into a lake in Florida, which was considered littering over 500 pounds and carried an automatic jail sentence. Tristan did not receive the medical care he desperately needed while in jail and ultimately cut his head off with a chainsaw. Christopher Ferguson is a 41-year-old man whose family repeatedly tried to get him help for 5 months while in psychosis. He now sits at Bridgewater State Hospital awaiting trial for allegedly breaking into a house in his neighborhood and taking the lives of 3 innocent people. He had no previous history of violence and was liked by many. Emmanuel Lopes was just found guilty of first-degree murder for taking the life of a police officer and an innocent bystander after crashing his car in 2018. His mother reported to me that he has schizophrenia, was in psychosis, and 4 weeks early was begging the hospital to keep him and was denied as his son reported that he did not want to hurt himself or others. There is a long history of schizophrenia on his father's side. A mom reached out to me whose 22-year-old son was arrested after attacking his father and almost killing him while in extreme bipolar psychosis. The family has spent years trying to get their son help and were forced to let him live on the streets as they feared him. He now sits in jail, refusing medication as he doesn't believe he is ill and thinks he deserves to be punished. He is reported climbing trees without clothes on so that he could get closer to God to speak to him and describes talking to the devil. In January, I got word from a mom that her daughter Margaret had passed away. Margaret lived with schizophrenia for the past 14 years and struggled with digestive issues. Her mental health condition prevented her from agreeing to the medical care she needed despite multiple attempts to involuntarily hospitalize her. Sadly, Margaret died from what could have been a treatable illness. These are the stories that aren't often told. Our organization advocates to ensure that we are the voices for the 22 million people living with and dying too young from serious mental illness. All of these family stories are similar in that they beg for help, often jumping through hoops to try and get their loved ones the medical care that was needed and were repeatedly told that there was nothing that could be done. When will our country acknowledge that living with a serious mental illness with psychosis requires a different approach in treating a mental health condition that one has insight into? I have spoken to peers who describe having no recollection of events that take place when experiencing psychosis and how intervention is crucial. We know that leaving psychosis untreated can have devastating consequences. It's inhumane to ignore what is happening around the country as we track the tragedies. It has never been more apparent that with early intervention and the right treatment, these tragedies are preventable. I hope that this committee will remember these stories as they provide input on what is needed to help those with SMI to lead a meaningful recovery. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of every family like mine.
Thank you so much, Anne. We greatly appreciate your comment. Moving forward to Al Galves.
Yes. Schizophrenia is a devastating illness, as you all know. And, we haven't really found a treatment that is associated with high levels of recovery. Recovery from schizophrenia has not improved since the 1950s. Now, I understand that the first episode psychosis programs are making some progress along these lines, but we have a long ways to go. So what I'm recommending is that the federal government, through all of its avenues, expand the number of soteria houses in the United States. Soteria houses are residential treatment programs for people with psychosis. They're home-like residents in which people experiencing psychosis receive safety, support, and affirmation as they go through the psychotic experience. Typically, in soteria houses, people stabilize within 6 to 8 weeks. Once they're stable, they're encouraged to go out into the community, help to go out, take a job, get a job, supported employment, go to school, take a class, support groups, therapy, art, recreation, church, 12-step groups, etc. The first soteria house was a project, it was a research project of the National Institute of Mental Health, operated in San Jose, California from 1971 to 1983. As a research project of the National Institute of Mental Health, a good study was done, comparing patients treated at soteria with patients treated at the hospitals. The result of that study was that the patients treated at Soteria were doing significantly better in terms of social functioning, employment, rehospitalizations, and symptoms. Nevertheless, the NIMH shut it down and buried that data, made no effort to replicate it, to expand it, to study it further. Since that time, there have been Soteria houses in Europe. There are 6 in Jerusalem now. There's 1 in Burlington, Vermont, that's been operating for 8 years very successfully. Basically, the Soteria model is based on the understanding that although psychosis is very impairing and scary and upsetting, it is a move by a wounded psyche towards recovery, towards survival, healing, and recovery. It's an inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, low-tech approach that is effective. I encourage and recommend that this group do what it can to get the federal government to expand, to greatly expand the number of Soteria houses in the United States.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gauss, for your public comment. Moving on to Doris Lynch.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes, sir.
Is there any information or a website for some of the existing houses that we could look at? I may have hung up. Okay, we'll see if I can find anything.
A good place to go is rethinkingpsychiatry.org. Go to rethinkingpsychiatry.org and click on the YouTube videos, and you can see videos of people who operated the original Soteria house, Soteria Alaska, which existed from 2009 to 2015, Soteria Vermont, and Soteria Israel. And
how's it spelled?
Rethink Soteria is S-O-T-E-R-I-A. S-O-T-E-R-A. Also, a wonderful resource is a book called Soteria From Madness to Deliverance by Lauren Mosier and Voice Hendricks. And you can get that on Amazon. It's called Soteria From Madness to Deliverance.
And do they provide medication at the facilities?
They do. They have contracts with psychiatrists. The medication is available on a voluntary basis, but it's not the primary modality of treatment. Primary modality is relationship, helping people develop relationships with other people.
Well, thank you for your information. We'll look into it.
You're welcome. Very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Doris Lynch.
She's there, Pam. I don't know what happened because she had the ability to unmute. Hold on, she's got her audio back. Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doris. Doris, you may want to check your microphone. See if your audio is up.
Okay, in the interest of time, I will come back to Ms. Lynch. I'm going to move on to Edmund Creekmore.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Very good. Thank you very much for giving me the NSSC this opportunity to make this statement. The National Shattering the Silence Coalition encourages consideration by ISMIC of experience-based co-design, EBCD, as an innovative evidence-based model for transitioning seriously mentally ill SMI adults and others with mental health disabilities from hospitals and jails to stable long-term support in the community with the help and support of their families and adult peers. EBCD is an evidence-based form of shared decision-making, which actively involves all participants in the mutual collaboration or co-design of treatment plans and services. EBCD is in common use in the United Kingdom and Australia in support of general medical practice as a collaborative care model, but is not commonly used in the United States. Is even less commonly used in the US in collaborative mental health care of those with serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, either in hospitals, jails, or the community. We at the NSSC know of only one such study in the US in Los Angeles County, California. EBCD involves the collaboration of all participants on an equal basis in the development of evidence-based recovery tools such as discharge and transition planning, advanced care directives, and in inpatient and outpatient crisis plans. EBCD may potentially be used with qualified adult peers and family members in support of 988 and 911 emergency intervention, and in support of point-of-care delivery of medical services provided in-home by licensed medical professionals. The typical EBCD protocol involves training, group peer support, role plays, and discussion of pre-recorded segments developed by participants or drawn from archival footage in preparation for step down to lesser levels of care and maintenance and support in the community. EBCD can be adapted and integrated for use in collaboration with assertive community, treatment, ACT teams, and other community-based health services through certified community behavioral health care centers. As in the LA study, it can be used to transition individuals as well with SMI from incarceration into community-based care per the CCBHC model and evidence-based standards.
Thank you, Mr. Creekmore. Moving on to Diane Kaufman. Ms. Kaufman, if you're joined by the phone, please press *6. If you are virtual.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
My name is Diane Kaufman. I am a child psychiatrist. When I was in medical school, alone one weekend in my dorm room, I tried to kill myself. I wanted to die, but instead of that happening, I started to vomit blood. I ended up medically admitted to Mount Sinai Hospital. I told no one at my medical school, nor any family or friends, as I feared, how could I ever become a psychiatrist if anyone knew my story? Years later, I was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder. As a poet, artist, physician, and a person with lived mental health and illness experience, I am dedicated to transforming trauma and despair into life-affirming creativity. I am the founder director of the Hold On Campaign for Suicide Prevention, a fiscally sponsored nonprofit that uses art to educate on suicide and helps those struggling with suicidal thoughts via the power of art to connect, express, and heal. Music is an art that reaches deep into heart, mind, and spirit beyond that of mere words. I am here today to advise the committee that the Hold On campaigns Don't Give Up, Lift You Up, Hold On, and Holding the Heart When It Breaks, suicide prevention songs, all inspired by my poetry become lyric, have garnered international acclaim, including awards for Best Original Song and Best Lyrics. These videos are available free of charge and can be posted on mental health websites and shared on social media. The music videos not only increase awareness of the 988 crisis and suicide lifeline number, but most importantly, they encourage the suicidal person to not give up, to be lifted up, to hold on, and to know they can be held and understood with compassion when their life is at the breaking point. To learn more about the Hold On campaign, please see www.holdoncampaign.org. I can be reached at diane@holdoncampaign.org. I would also like to share with the committee the Just Like This Tree poster that has text by myself and artwork by Amanda Meador. It was created in August 2019 after the suicide death of my friend and mental health colleague, Stacy, who left behind 2 sets of young twins when she jumped off a bridge. If anyone is interested in the poster, which could also be used as an art card with suicide prevention resources on its back, please reach out to me. Thank you so much for allowing me to contribute today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kaufman. Moving on to Vic Well.
Hello. My name is Vic Welly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I am a peer support trainer and the co-founder of a Peer Run Respite, which is a community-based resource where people experiencing emotional distress can stay overnight and receive peer support as an alternative to emergency rooms, jails, or locked psychiatric facilities. And I do this work because I want to be able to offer options like this that were not available to me when I was struggling. If you were to look at my medical records and case notes, you would see phrases like serious and persistent mental illness, and at one point in time, a vulnerable adult. You would see hospitalizations, many, many medications, and many, many different kinds of therapies. And in spite of all of those many clinical interventions, I continued to cycle in and out of the psychiatric system for years. But I was able to interrupt that cycle and find healing. And what worked for me was a combination of access to stable, affordable housing, body-based interventions that helped me process trauma, and most of all, the healing relationships that I developed in peer support communities. Communities like Alternatives to Suicide support groups, which are run by and for those of us who know what it's like to want to die by suicide. Or a Spiritual Explorations peer support group, where those of us who don't feel welcomed in traditional faith communities due to our mental health history or other issues can meet and talk about our connection to the sacred. And peer support groups also offer space for people to talk about how their mental well-being is impacted by the ongoing harms of racism, transphobia, violence, and economic security. And it's because of these initiatives led by and for those of us who carry psychiatric labels like SMI that I know it's possible to go through significant mental health challenges and find long-term healing and recovery. Programs like Peer Run Respite and peer support groups are effective because they are voluntary, they decrease isolation, and they open up new possibilities for exploring what a meaningful life can look like. I'm grateful for the funding and support that is currently offered to develop and sustain peer-run or consumer programs. And as SAMHSA and other federal agencies work to improve and strengthen supports for people diagnosed with significant mental health challenges, I urge you to increase funding and support for peer-to-peer, community-based projects developed by and for those of us who know what it's like to experience these challenges, including challenges that get labeled as psychosis, schizophrenia, or other challenging serious mental illnesses. Please offer our peer-led organizations long-term funding to sustain programs and provide peer support workers with a living wage. Please invite us to decision-making bodies and seek out our consultation at all stages of program development. We are subject matter experts, and we can bring new perspectives about what is culturally relevant, effective support. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Vic Welly. Appreciate your comment. Moving on to Yulia Miklovala.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for discussing the Olmsted. And I am speaking on behalf of the many who cannot speak for themselves. Let me share stories of two such people. One was forcibly hospitalized and medicated, then lived on the streets, hiding from her parents, who believed that forced treatment was in her best interest. Eventually, she escaped the system, received help with housing and real treatment. Now she has a degree and a full-time job. Her parents sought and received forgiveness from her. She does not share her story publicly, fearing that her colleagues and neighbors may learn about her diagnosis. As it is, they have no idea because she recovered completely. Nothing in her behavior indicates mental illness. Another person did not have any problems with his treatment. He found his medication helpful, took it voluntarily. Then he was ordered into assisted outpatient treatment. They abruptly switched him to a different medication, which affected him badly, and committed him to a hospital where he was beaten. His mother alleges that the AOT manager embezzled his Medicaid money and was trying to silence him. I saw photos of his bloody face and medical records from the ER where he was treated for injuries. A journalist started to investigate this story, but soon they asked him to stop. The son was threatened to be sent back to the hospital if the family speak out. So, many people are silent out of fear. Others do not have time and energy for advocacy. To give this comment, I had to cancel a class today. Not everyone can take time off work. Tracing bills and organizing campaigns is a full-time job for which pharma-funded nonprofits have well-paid employees. Advocates of non-coercive treatment are not coordinated and paid by paid professionals. We are overworked and scattered over many small grassroots groups. I can do advocacy now that my daughter has fully recovered from her psychosis under the care of a provider practicing the open dialogue method. But when she had her psychotic symptoms, I spent every spare minute supporting her and searching for effective treatments until I found our open dialogue. So when I hear mothers of children with serious mental illness commenting on bills or funding provisions, I wonder, how do they learn about them? How do they find time? Do they receive information and assistance from pharma-funded astroturfs or the Treatment Advocacy Center? I hope and pray that you ask yourselves these questions when considering public comments. Mothers asking you to expand forced treatment may be sincere, but they represent only a fraction of parents whose voices are amplified beyond all proportion by a big money machine. Please find it in you to resist this machine. Stop the situation when American mental health policy is shaped by the pharma companies and by the agenda of the dead mail order billionaire Stanley, whose son got out of the hospital, went on to receive an education to have a career, but now this son uses the family money to deprive other people of the free choice and opportunities that he enjoyed. Because their brainchild, AOT, deprives people of those opportunities. Please fund evidence-based, non-coercive treatments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment, Julia. I'm going to circle back now to Doris Lynch. I believe Doris is on the phone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank goodness. I cannot tell you, it was very difficult to participate in this Zoom. I've never had such a difficult time, quite honestly. It may just be, you know, a different connection. I've been part of dozens of Zooms. I don't want to sit here and complain about that, but as soon as I put on the chat, once I was reconnected to the chat, I finally can communicate. I was bounced off of the virtual end of it. Then I had to try to recall what you said to do on the phone. And thankfully you repeated it, which may have been a problem with other people, to hit the number 6. So anyway, here I am, and hearing these very heartfelt stories from many individuals, and sadly nobody can communicate back to them on a chat, as well as on a chat to say, hey, how do I get connected, or whatever it may be. Very disappointing. My heart goes out to each and every one of them. I know many suffering with severe mental illness, and all are different, but many similar. And even those suffering feel, sadly, they feel there is better opportunities for them. It should not be as difficult, and it's basically money related. And for someone suffering with a mental illness, which is the same as someone suffering with a heart disease or whatever it may be, they should get the same treatment. For a child that's over the age of 14 and their parents are not permitted to have any say is absurd, completely absurd. These children are not in their right minds. Their family is their support system. Their family is supposed to be involved in their life up until and responsible until the age of 18. Although if it's related to mental health, no. Completely baffling. It's a disgrace. I can understand if there was a DHS system, Department of Human Services, or there was something with the parents that concern the doctors. Well, no, well, maybe they shouldn't be involved. But when there's nothing of such, the parents should not be removed from the children's care related to mental health. And then you have the HIPAA law. So when someone is mentally ill, they have no contact with anyone, but yet they're in there under doctor's care and they're not in their right mind. There should be something implemented when they leave that hospital that they can sign saying, God forbid if I'm ever committed again, if I'm 3 or 2, if I'm in this facility or any again, I want to sign a form giving permission, now that I'm in my right mind, departing from this hospital, that you have permission to contact so-and-so at this number. There's nothing like that. They should have permission. It's in other states, but not in Pennsylvania. What goes on, you know, why it's in one place and not in another, just wrong. It should be amended throughout the country. These people are suffering, and it's a battle for their well-being every day. It's a battle for their housing every day. It's a battle for them to. It shouldn't be this way. There's a DNA test that can be implemented to determine what medicine is best for the chemical imbalance in one's brain. Hardly anybody knows about it. There's no funding for it to be given to individuals when they enter a hospital. So they're given numerous medications, like a guinea pig. And when there's this DNA test swabbed inside the cheek, right now your chemicals are this, and that are in balance. So this medication would be the best right now for you. But they can't do it because there's no funding, is what I've been told by political people. It's a disgrace. Why are we doing this to our fellow human beings? then they end up out in the street because their loved ones are in jeopardy of their lives as well. Because yes, schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, as we know, with many mass shootings, we're focusing on the drugs on the street. We're focusing on the guns. Who's holding the guns? They're not in their right mind. Many of them who cause mass shootings are people who are mentally ill. Let's stop avoiding it. There's no stigma. People are talking about mental illness. Our government is stagnant. It's doing nothing. Nothing has changed in X amount of years. All here know that. Very little. There's no connection. None. It's this organization talking, that organization talking. We need to unite. The shenanigans need to stop. Save the lives. Get things right. The communication here was sour, and that's how it is throughout anything with mental illness. Forgive me for, I'm talking quickly because I don't want to sit here and talk for half an hour. There's many more topics, and I hope I touch someone's mind with something that can make some change. I'm sorry if I sound angry, but I am, and I know many are. And I'm speaking from my heart. I had nothing written down. I dedicated my day to this, and I appreciate the information that was shared, but most of it has been spoken over and over again. You need to give better connection to the people suffering, and their families cannot be blocked out. My particular neighborhood, we've never had a mental health gathering, anything related, and we need it. So we're doing it in May. It needs to be done more and more. The organizations need to come to the communities more and more. I know you're doing what you can, but we need more. I appreciate the time, and God willing, things will change quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Litch, for your public comment. So that concludes our public comment section for today. I just want to remind everyone that the public comments that were submitted will be entered as part of the official meeting record and will be entered into the meeting minutes and will be shared with all of the ISMIC members. Thank you again to everyone who called in today, and I'm now going to turn the meeting back over to our Assistant Secretary, Dr. Delphin Rittman.
Thank you so much, Pam. And, I want to say a special thank you to everyone who provided either written or public comment. We really appreciate your spending time with us and giving your feedback and sending in your feedback. It really is, an important reminder of why we're here, why we're doing this work, why this work is important, and especially now. So know that we appreciate your sharing your feedback. I also want to say a special thank you to the Center for Mental Health Services, Dr. Anita Everett, and her team who's worked so hard with putting this meeting together. Also for the staff stewards who lead the work groups and today's meeting, but also the work in between meetings. I also want to say thank you to everyone who's on the meeting for your desire and passion to make sure that people with serious mental illness or serious emotional distress have access to and are able to utilize more effective services and systems. I mean, ultimately, we are definitely committed and focused on working to ensure that. We know this meeting it was so rich with information. We appreciated the discussion and the conversation and the questions and all the coordinated effort that you were able to hear about and that folks shared about. You can tell that, the working groups are definitely busy in terms of what's happening in between meetings, but also just the range of collaborations to be able to make meaningful impacts. And for me, I think that's what makes this meeting so special. I think having the opportunity to hear about the work and the influence both from federal and then non-federal partners, and really to have this and share this space together is really important. It makes this meeting so valuable. So we look forward to the ongoing work and to our next meeting, which will be coming up in the fall. As you heard, we are looking to do that meeting in person. So be on the lookout for a save the date soon. Also be on the lookout for our report to Congress so that we can coordinate and get some feedback from you all. It's always so helpful to get that feedback, and important that we get the feedback from this committee. So again, thank you for attending and for being with with us for the full day. I hope everyone has a good remaining rest of the day and is able to have a great spring and summer, and hope you've been able to enjoy some cherry blossoms wherever you are, because they're blooming really all over the place, many different places now. And so again, take care, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, the ISBIC meeting is now adjourned.